Hello there, welcome to another video. I'm still in Cornwall today, but as you can see the weather has taken a turn for the worst. It's grey, miserable and very windy. Well, that's what you get in mid-spring in the UK some days, unfortunately. And I'm sure you'll hear the wind on the playback. Sorry about that. So, today I'm in the southwestern corner of Cornwall, in the village of Sennen Cove. Well, maybe not the village itself. As you can see, I'm 3/4 of the way up a steep cliff overlooking a World War II pillbox and the Atlantic Ocean. Or is that the Celtic Sea? I can never remember without getting a map out. So our video today is going to be an alternative trip to Land's End. Land's End being the southwestern tip of the UK landmass, and because of that it's a massive tourist trap. Maybe not in today's weather, but certainly in midsummer there are hundreds if not thousands of people visiting it a day, and because of that it is expensive and it's designed to rip off tourists. If you're from North America, think of it as a British version of Niagara Falls. So what I intend to do today is show you an alternative visit to Land's End that you can follow yourself, avoiding the crowds, avoiding the rip-offs, and you'll have a more enjoyable experience. So in a minute I'm going to tiptoe precariously down this cliff back into the village of Sennen Cove, and we're going to pick up the southwestern coastal path to Land's End in this alternative visit to Land's End, the southwestern tip of the United Kingdom. Hope you'll stay with me. Let's go. If you're British, I'm fairly certain you know exactly where Land's End is. But for my non-UK subscribers, here's where we are in the world today. This is a more detailed map of Land's End, the most southwesterly point of the United Kingdom, so I can show you today's adventure in some detail. We, as I already mentioned, are halfway up a cliff in the village of Sennen, northwest of Land's End. And today, we're going to head to Pordenack Point, about 2 miles further on. Don't worry about the route or the directions, just keep the sea to your right and follow me. Right, let's start exploring the real Land's End. Okay, back to the cliff top in Sennen. Having parked my car up in the Sennen Beach car park on arrival, I spotted these World War II bunkers at the top of the cliff, and I just had to go up and have a look. And once we're up here, we've got our first glimpse of Sennen Cove, Sennen Beach and the village of Sennen, and the route we're going to start treading in a minute. And what a view. Going inside, these World War II bunkers were built in summer 1940 as a defence against the expected Nazi invasion of the United Kingdom, Hitler's so-called Operation Sea Lion, presumably because Sennen Beach is an ideal amphibious landing point. And this is the view the soldiers guarding these bunkers would have had firing onto the beach below. Fortunately, Hitler's expected invasion never materialised, and these bunkers were never actually needed in war, and they've stood here ever since. Back down from the cliff path, we're back in the very reasonably priced Sennen Beach car park, and from here we can look at Sennen Beach at ground level. It might look a bit miserable today, but in summer Sennen is one of the best sandy beaches in the Land's End area. But also, because of the rough Atlantic waves, it's really popular with surfers. But I can assure you today, it's certainly not Point Break weather. Leaving the windswept beach and the car park behind us and heading in a southwesterly direction through the village on foot, the first place you're going to come across is the fantastic Old Success Inn public house. This place is great for food and also beer, but I think we'll leave that for later in the day when we return to Sennen to pick the car up. Remember my advice, keep the sea to your right and you can't go wrong. So now we're going to follow Sennen's main street south towards the harbour. Although Sennen is a holiday destination, it's also a working Cornish fishing village and it hasn't lost any of its authenticity. The fishing harbour is fairly recent in historical terms, constructed in 1908, 114 years ago, after campaigning by the local Justice of the Peace, the magistrate, Colonel H.W. Williams. I was going to walk down to the end of the harbour arm and record some content for you, but I worked out if I slipped off the end and went into the drink, I was going straight to the bottom of the harbour and I wasn't coming back. Sorry, I don't value my YouTube channel that much. But it appears that advice is lost on this group of 20-somethings, 2 guys and a girl, indulging in that not often fatal accident-prone pastime of tombstoning, i.e. jumping off high objects into wild seas. Those expensive wetsuits indicate these are fairly rich holiday makers, not local scallies. although it's quite clear the girl is not enjoying her Cornish vacation one bit. Rather sensibly, she seems very reluctant to throw herself off the harbour arm to a potential watery early death. I feel an episode of Aussie Man's Destination F unfolding here, so let's keep the camera rolling and let Aussie Man take over the narration.
It's important to remember you only live once. I don't say this to encourage risky, fun behaviour. I say it to discourage risky, fun behaviour. Bloody hell, Sheilas in bikinis and destination are like peas and carrots. They go well together.
She's psyching herself up to go for it, so this is either going to be great content or it's going to be coroner's inquest evidence.
No way, don't do it. It's a dodgy idea. You know what it sounds like? It sounds like a one-way, all-expenses-paid business class trip to destination
And she lived. Okay, let's move on. Just behind and up from the harbour is this very unique building, the Roundhouse. Home today to the Capstan Gallery, an art gallery and studio. Worth a look inside if you've got time, and I'll put a link to their website in the video description. The Roundhouse is a Grade 2 listed building constructed in the 18th century and originally housed a capstan, a form of manual windlass apparatus used by the fishermen to drag the boats out of the sea and up the steep harbour banks. Apparently, the windlass capstan is still in place. Carrying on past the Roundhouse, we're now going to pick up the steps up to the Maen Cliff. This is a fairly steep climb, to be honest with you, and it's going to give your heart a really good workout. But the view back down the village is fantastic. The arrow here indicates the World War II bunkers, our start point of the video. We've only come about a fifth of the way so far. Take your time climbing the steps, but once you get to the high ground, that's most of the hard work done for the day. You are now in the wilderness of Maen Cliff, wind-cropped heathland and craggy cliffs. It's very windy up here, even on a good day. But now we just follow the southwest path across the heathland. We're now 1¼ miles away from Land's End, and we're going to head to this landmark. This is the old Coastguard lookout building. Built in 1891, it was originally crewed by a team of coastguards who lived in the village of Sennen and then rotated their shifts by walking up the cliffs every day. During World War II, it was used as a lookout principally for U-boats that were stalking British shipping heading out towards the Atlantic. But when World War II finished in the mid-1940s, it was decommissioned. It then fell into dereliction until 1997, when it was refurbished and restored as a landmark and a listed building. From the Coastguard lookout point and the top of Maen Cliff, the views out to sea, particularly in the summer good weather, become spectacular. The path is very well worn and easy to follow. But even if you're up here and it's a bit foggy, you've got these path markers every 500 metres or so, which will show you the correct way to go. After about 20 minutes walking or a further kilometre, you'll come across this scene. And what could be more authentic Cornish coast than a real life shipwreck? It can be quite difficult to see at first unless you get the correct angle. But once you get closer up, you'll see that this is the wreckage of the RMS Mulheim. Land's End historically has always been a graveyard of shipping for Britain for over 300 years. There are literally hundreds of wrecks lost on the ocean and on the rocks of Land's End. Given its southern Cape location, its extreme weather and its hidden rocks, it is Britain's Bermuda Triangle. You might think that the wreck we've just found dates back to the era of the Titanic or perhaps World War II. Well, think again, it's not even 20 years old. The RMS Mulheim was a German-owned coastal bulk carrier constructed in Romania in 1998. This is her in happier times around the year 2000. And then, sadly, on the 22nd of March in the year 2003, the RMS Mulheim was lost on the rocks of Land's End. So what caused this disaster? Well, allegedly, a pair of trousers. The story goes that during the night of the 22nd of March at 0500 hours, The Mulheim was travelling from Cork in the Republic of Ireland to Lübeck in Germany via Land's End, in poor visibility with patchy fog and fairly rough seas. The ship's chief officer was alone on watch and allegedly caught his trousers in a lever in the watchroom, causing him to tumble and knock himself out. When he came to, the Mulheim was already bearing down on the rocks and was beyond saving. Well, that's his story, and he's sticking to it. Within a short time of her ending up on the rocks, it became apparent that the ship was lost. The 6-man Polish crew were airlifted to safety, but because the ship's back was broken, she was unsalvageable. A cargo of waste plastic from Ireland was unloaded over the course of a week, and she was then stripped of anything of value, and then left to remain here for the next 19 years as the action of the sea slowly broke her up. You can get a really good view and really great photos from the top of the cliff looking down onto the RMS Mulheim today. How often do you get to see a real life shipwreck in the United Kingdom? Well, am I going to be satisfied with that? No, of course I'm not. It's a real life shipwreck. How can I not go and visit it close up and personal for the channel? Yeah, we're not going to worry about that side. We're going to climb down the cliff and have a look at the RMS Mulheim close up anyway.
Okay, so we finally made it down to the bottom of the cliff to come and have a look at the RS Mulheim wreck. I've done this so you don't have to. It is a fairly treacherous descent. You don't need ropes, just watch your footing. If you do take a tumble, you're going to fall quite a long way, but it isn't that dangerous. Having said that, you do need to be fairly fit and take your time. I definitely wouldn't bring kids down here. It's far too dangerous for kids. When you get down here, though, it's not that exciting. I think the story of the RMS Mulheim is more interesting than the actual visiting the wreck. But it is a bit of an Instagram moment, so you'll see it on my Insta page. I'm going to take the camera around the wreck now, again, so you don't have to, and then I'm going to pick my way slowly back to the top of the cliff, and I'll see you back on the southwest coastal path, and we'll continue our route onto Land's End.
Okay, all bravado aside, as a responsible YouTuber, I really should point out there are various signs at the top of the cliff saying don't go anywhere near the wreck, and I can understand why they're there. It is quite a hazardous area. One of the things I didn't mention when I did my vlog down the bottom there was, firstly, it's a tidal area, and the tide does come in quite quickly, so don't go inside the wreck, whatever you do. You'll end up getting stuck in there and drowned. And the other one is there's no mobile phone coverage down there. So if you go down there alone and you get into trouble, you're on your own. My side quest to the Mulheim wreck took me a couple of hours with climbing and filming, etc. But I imagine you guys will probably just stop at the cliff top for some photographs for about 15 minutes before you move on. Well, you can now see our next objective on the horizon, the first and last house, and also the Longships rocks in the background. It's going to take you about 20 minutes on foot from the site of the Mulheim wreck to the first and last house. The going is quite easy, it's nice and flat, and you can see where you're going all the time. The views are spectacular. The Longships are a group of treacherous to shipping, rocky islets, situated about 1.5 miles out to sea, south from Land's End. As well as being quite picturesque in good weather, and also quite dramatic to photograph in bad weather, the rocks are a very popular recreational diving spot. Because so many ships were lost to the Longships rocks during the 1700s, in 1795 a lighthouse was constructed on the main islet, but not the one we see today. The original lighthouse was crewed by two sets of lighthouse keepers who would rotate 1 month on, 1 month off in the lighthouse. The first lighthouse was not deemed adequate for the treacherous rough seas around the Longships, so quite soon in 1869 the present day lighthouse was constructed. It was crewed until about 1988 when it was finally automated, and in 2006 it was converted to solar power. The light now has a range of 15 miles and there is a fog warning signal horn, one blast every 10 seconds in heavy fog. I don't know about you, but I always find lighthouses a bit eerie and a bit creepy, particularly in low light and in fog. It's probably from Hollywood horror films such as John Carpenter's The Fog or Afterlife. Anyway, at the same time the lighthouse was being constructed, in 1855 a row of lighthouse keepers' cottages was also constructed, about a mile inland from the cliffs with direct line of sight out to Longships lighthouse. These housed the relief crews for the lighthouse and their families. But pre-wireless, the only way they could communicate with the lighthouse was by signal light or semaphore. Today, unsurprisingly, they are holiday Airbnbs. Arriving now at our next landmark and waypoint on our route, the building's known as the First and Last House. I think you can work out yourself why it's called that. Built around the early 1800s, it was originally a dwelling, probably a crofter's cottage, but is today a cafe and a tourist souvenir shop. It will be your first experience of the commercialisation of Land's End, but it's usually more peaceful here than the main tourist complex, and a good place to stop for a rest, coffee or a snack, if you can stomach the eye-watering prices. 500 metres on from the First and Last House is the main Land's End tourist attraction or tourist complex, whatever you want to call it. With its huge overpriced car parks and coach parks, its hordes of tourists, it resembles from the air an out-of-town shopping mall. Remember, we are on a non-tacky tourist visit today, so we really don't want to spend much time here. But, like the fictional Bartertown in the movie Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, we can't continue our journey without passing through Bartertown. Sorry, I mean the Land's End tourist complex. So I'm going to show you the sorry sight that awaits you when you enter this place. This place is absolutely awful. Just remember that everything here is designed to rinse money out of gullible tourists, usually foreign tourists. From the £25 entry fee for the attractions, the £8 Cornish pasties or the £5 ice creams. It doesn't look it today, but in summer it's absolutely packed, often with idiots who go no further than the Land's End sign. The place is absolutely awful. Do avoid it. I will contradict myself and say there is one establishment worth a visit here, and we'll do that on our return leg. But to illustrate my antipathy to this place, when you think of a visit to Land's End, no doubt this is the image you've got in mind, the Land's End sign. And you probably fancy having a photograph for yourself, your partner or your family with the Land's End sign when you come and visit. Well, that's okay. It's no different to posing with a Hollywood sign if you're visiting Los Angeles. But if you imagine you'll be able to stroll up to the Land's End sign and calmly pose for a snap and have a perfect experience for you and your partner or your family, think again. This is the reality of the Land's End sign. That's right, just like everything else in this tourist complex, you have to pay. Some bloke with a dodgy point and shoot camera will take your photograph. The whole area is fenced off and you will need to queue. And in the summer, you'll probably queue for over an hour behind 2 coachloads of Japanese tourists. Then there's the prices. $14 for a small postcard-sized print, or $18 for an A5 size print. Sadly, even with these rip-off prices, this is all some tourists come to Land's End to do. Also, annoyingly, the Land's End sign isn't even historic. It's always been a tourist construct. For first started in the early 1960s, and it's not even close to the furthest southwest point of the complex, which is here. This is where you should be having your photograph taken, and it's free. Another inconvenient fact is that the Land's End complex actually isn't the furthest southwesterly point by any stretch of the imagination, although exactly where that is open to debate. But I'll settle for the furthest southwest triangulation survey station, constructed in 1936 by Ordnance Survey. Although strangely enough, you would think this would be trig point number 1. It's not. That's in Cold Ashby in Northampton. Having escaped the tourist rip-offs and the zombie crowds in Bartertown, we could continue our journey south into a re-entrant heading towards the next landmark known as Greeb Farm. Take us about 10-15 minutes to get there, and it's about 500 metres from the tourist complex. Greeb Farm was built in the 1800s and originally was a working farm. Today, it's still a working farm of sorts for exotic breeds, but it's mainly a tourist attraction. A pay-to-enter petting zoo and craft shop, selling handmade goods and jewellery. I think it's £5 to enter, and it's very child-friendly. So I wouldn't really class this place as a rip-off. If you've got a family, the kids will love it. But for adults, really you've seen everything as you pass through. Although I did want somebody to get spat at by the alpacas just for the content. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Fortunately, the tourists really don't venture much past Greeb Farm. So very soon, leaving the farm behind you, you're on your own again in the peace and quiet of the countryside. Our final destination is Pordenack Point, which is a further half a mile on from Greeb Farm. And from there, you'll get a really good view of the famous scenic point, Enys Dodnan Arch.
Okay, so that was the Enys Dodnan Arch. It's in a cove behind me. We've got about 500 metres past it, and that's about as far south as I intend to go today. Otherwise, I'm going to end up circumnavigating the United Kingdom. I'm fairly tired, so I'm going to head back up to the Land's End Hotel and have a beer, and then I'm going to head back towards the car, which is going to take me about an hour and a half on foot. I'm not going to show you that because it's exactly the same route as we did out. I think I'll close this video actually at the furthest southwesterly point of the United Kingdom, Land's End itself. So let's head back up to the Land's End Hotel and close the video up from there.
Depending on your level of fatigue now, it'll take you about half an hour to get back up to the main tourist complex. But once we're there, we're going to visit the bar of the Land's End Hotel. This hotel is a 3-star hotel, and it comes quite recommended on TripAdvisor, 4 out of 5. It sits awkwardly with the same tacky tourist complex, but always seems set above it. It's also a very popular wedding venue. The bar is nice with great views out across Land's End, and I thoroughly recommend stopping here for a beer or a meal. But if you do want a meal, because the place is so busy, I recommend booking well in advance. Because I've got a long trek back to Sennen Cove to go and pick the car up, I really couldn't stay here long. But now I think we'd better close this video up.
Okay, here we are again at Land's End, just down the steps from Land's End Hotel, and about as far southwest as I go without dropping off the edge of the cliff. And that's the end of our journey and our video today. I hope you've enjoyed it, I hope you've found something new, and I hope you follow my footsteps when the weather's better in the summer. Thanks for staying with me, and if you want to look at my other Cornwall videos or anything else on my channel, please feel free to look them up. It would do me an awful favour if anything you found on my channel you liked, because that's how the YouTube algorithms shows you more new stuff that I make. Thanks for staying with me. Bye now.